Hello, this is Elmashni. I am presenting a PowerPoint on leadership measurement instruments for MSDS 480, the business leadership course. So I completed the assessment where we had to interpret our results regarding leadership styles. And if we start this presentation, starting with the assessment on situational leadership, I only got number 4 correct. And what that tells me is that I need to recognize opportunities to act as a mentor when someone needs mentorship but can't articulate that need. To give a good example, um, in situation 1, where you have some budget restrictions and you have someone who's very capable of taking charge, um, I pretty much thought that you could assign the project to the person and let them determine how to assign a task and provide support and encouragement. That's kind of my natural tendencies to give support and encouragement to someone. Um, but I guess the right situation is just let the person take the lead and kind of give them that ownership. Um, but the next situation where situation 2, where you have inexperienced employees who are not following through. I always kind of feel like, let's communicate, discuss the lack of follow through with them, and explore alternatives. But apparently, the right situation was to define the steps necessary for that person to complete the assigned tasks and monitor performance frequently. That's not really quite my style, but I can see where someone would need that mentorship and be able to recognize that need, and that's something I think I would need to work on. But I think going through that assessment did affirm that I am very supportive. I did get situation 4 correct, where you have someone who is unsure about the ability to do the job, but you really encourage a person to say, listen, you can do it, you can coach them. And I think that's kind of comes from my experience being a classroom teacher, where sometimes I'll get kids who are not so sure of themselves, and myself, being the mentor, I need to kind of tell them, look, you can do it. So I do feel I have those mentorship qualities, but sometimes recognizing when, let people take ownership and not get in the way. In terms of leadership styles, looking at transformational, transactional, or passive avoidant leadership styles, I scored 3s and 4s for transformational leadership. But interestingly, I also scored 3s and 4s for transactional leadership. Glad I scored 1s for passive leadership. And I could see some validity with both transformational and transactional leadership styles. But obviously, transformational is probably more desirable, as I'll discuss later in this video. But I do find myself meeting a lot of those I's, like idealized influence, idealized inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, individualized consideration. Um, but I could see sometimes, as a teacher, you do want to give rewards. Like if do a certain project, you get extra credit, or you give an assessment, and so you give them back a grade, and so there's kind of that give and take. And of course, I do keep track of mistakes, like when they don't turn homework and stuff like that. But I could see how there could be some downside to that as well, because you really want to be able to um, help your students grow. And we'll talk about those different styles of transformational and transactional later in this video. So this is how I scored on the 30 question seminar, and also I gave this to some of my colleagues at work. And this is the adaptive leadership questionnaire. And pretty close if you look at how I rated myself with my colleagues, not too far off. And it's interesting that get on the balcony and regulate the stress were 2 of the higher ones for me, and then the lowest one was identify adaptive challenge. So it's very good to see this. And I do agree with these results. Yeah, I mean, with get on the balcony, the score represents the degree to which you are able to step back and see the complexities. And I do find myself doing that often. Sometimes I really want to kind of see the big picture. Um, and the other one where I scored pretty high was regulate the stress. Be able to create a safe environment where people can tackle difficult problems, and to which you're seeing as confident, calm, in conflict situation. I do consider myself a very calming presence, Even my wife says that too. But identify adaptive challenges. I think that's where I need some work to recognize that challenge and do not respond to these challenges with technical leadership. Um, Again, I need to let others kind of work issues out. I think that was interesting looking at the previous slide where some of the situation I didn't get correct, especially situation two, where kind of like let people take ownership of their problems and give them those responsibilities. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little too hands-on. So I think that was kind of interesting seeing that. So here's the transformational characteristics. Idealized influence, where you let lead by example, set those expectations. Intellectual stimulation, encourage learning and growth. Inspirational motivation, inspiring to go to new heights. Individualized consideration, coaching, empowering to success. Um, I think two that I do pretty well, but I think I could definitely use some work on the idealized influence. Um, I definitely think they have a lot of exuberance and charisma, but sometimes I don't really leverage that in my leadership style. And Nelson Mandela is a great example of how he had a vision and high moral standards, and that definitely led to transformation in South Africa by lifting apartheid. Um, and I don't think I'm able to, or not, haven't been able to really get myself take, like my exuberance and have that as part of my leadership style. And I think if I could, that could, can lead to transformation. So I think that's something where I would need to leverage that. And I think a lot of us do have that. Like if you're naturally extroverted, you come off being very enthusiastic and exuberant, but how do you actually harness that? And I think that's where something I want to work on that. Inspiration, motivation. Um, Again, having a clear vision, being very optimistic, be able to inspire, motivate your followers, make sure people feel included. And I feel I do that as well. Um, but how do you actually empower those people who might feel like they're on the margin and say, hey, you can actually, be a strong contributor on this team. And that's something I think it's taken time to work on, be cognizant especially when you have students in the back who are not really responding or participating. How do you actually get those people involved? A good example would be Dick Vermeil, who was the coach of the St. Louis Rams in the late '90s and won a Super Bowl with them. And how he was very, very encouraging, especially when they lost their quarterback Trent Green, and then they had Kurt Warner, some guy off the street was bagging groceries, playing arena football, and pretty much one of the greatest Cinderella stories in NFL history, where this guy all of a sudden was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and just be able to motivate and encourage. And I think that's something that Coach Dick Vermeil did really well, and uh, a great model to follow. Something that I think any leader should aspire to have. I do feel I do this pretty well, intellectual stimulation, especially because I just gave a test to my students who most of them bombed, and so they really need to boost their critical thinking skills. So I think that's something that I need to, but not need that I think I do a pretty good job of. But trying to set goals and challenges, I think that's important as well. Um, and then individual consideration. Empathy. I think one of the great marks of a classroom teacher is having empathy, being able to understand what kids are going through and say, hey, look, I've been there before. I know it's hard. Here's what you need to do. And I think good leaders do that. And I think as being an analytical leader, you need to have that. Even though we get so caught up in the numbers, we do need to have that empathy and be able to understand, okay, we've been in that position. Okay, things are not working out. How do we get to where we need to be? Sometimes setting parameters might help, but that can be transactional. Other great mentors come to mind, Bill Walsh. If you look at his coaching tree, he spawned a lot of NFL coaches. Whereas Bill Belichick doesn't really do a good job of that. Great transactional leader, but not so much transformational. Um, Whereas again, Bill Walsh was able to get guys like Andy Reid or John Gruden become really good coaches in the NFL. Bill Campbell, who was the mentor for Steve Jobs, Bill Campbell actually was a parent at my school. He passed away a couple years ago, but I taught his kids, and so very well known in the Bay Area, and considered one of the great coaches of Silicon Valley CEOs. And I think that is also that can help create transformational leaders where you can help them have that genuine concern and needs for feelings for others. Um, and then this is one more slide looking at the difference between transformational and transactional leadership. Transactional rewards and punishments, micromanaging doesn't really seem like that's a great fit for most people. Whereas if you're able to delegate tasks, give people freedom, encourage them to think outside the box, more concerned with ideas as opposed to processes. Um, I think that, again, going for higher level needs, I think that's for what we aspire to be as analytical leaders. So that concludes this video on leadership measurement instruments.